I'm going to be talking today about leveraging Ansys simulation to improve your medical device design. My name is Chris Smith, and like Cassie said, I'm here with Will Jeffrey and Jared Houston. I myself am a CHD specialist, as well as the FA specialist and the Electromagnetic specialist. We kind of give our own perspectives based on our physics in relation to medical device design. Before I jump into some of the content, I want to briefly go over a little table of contents of where we're going to be going throughout this presentation. So the first thing that I'll cover is where Ansys has been used in the biomedical industries currently. Then I'll kind of follow that up with how Ansys can be used to your benefit for your business initiatives, followed up by some fluids and mechanical case studies, a brief demo of a two-way FSI, that's a two-way fluid structure interaction stent simulation, and then concluding with some electromagnetic case studies. So to jump into it, where is Ansys used in the biomedical industries? The answer to that is actually basically across the board. As you can see on the slide, we cover most areas that are encompassed in the biomedical industries, and that ranges from cardiovascular, respiratory, etc. And Ansys is used primarily in these fields largely because of its ability to couple physics simulations together. So that would be coupling fluids and thermal, fluids and structures, fluids and electromagnetics, or whatever the combination might be, in order to optimize and help design devices. As we all know, most biomedical devices are highly related to multi-physics simulations or multi-physics aspects. So the capabilities of Ansys to pair those together is one of its definite strong suits. And just to give an idea of the breadth that Ansys has in the field, currently 88% of the top 50 largest medical device companies utilize Ansys for some of their designs, whether it be for stent optimization, personalized drug delivery, inhaler design and optimization, personalized surgery, whatever it might be. So now to get into some of the areas that Ansys can help you in your business initiatives. And the first big thing that's at the top of the list is always to reduce costs of design, devices, and services. And design is more frequently moving towards computational models first and an experiment second. And this is done to save cost on those expensive experiments because you can use your simulation, your modeling, in order to guide your experiments and kind of home in on a productive design space instead of spending a lot of money on testing prototypes that might not end up working or fleshing out into a functional design. And in addition to this, simulation can actually be used to assist FDA approval, whether it be through your pre-market setup or whatever. Simulation can be a helpful tool in advancing those and getting some of the regulatory paperwork out of the way so you can move into the design phase. Second, it can help boost innovation rates, whether it be through quick ideation through simulation. Instead of spending time setting up and building a prototype and then testing it, you can do some quick simulation models to see if it's even a feasible concept. It can also enable adaptive design processes, allowing quick changes to be made and then shown in the results and how effective the medical device might be. It can also be useful in quantifying some of those trends early for specific property changes or dimensions within your medical device in order to gain some quantitative data in order to help drive your prototyping into a final product. And it also allows some of that physical phenomena to be visualized during the design process to help build up a little bit of an intuition for how some changes might alter the effects of the device, which can be extremely helpful again in that early stage where you're trying to innovate and have ideas come through to fully designed products. It can also help enable remote and personalized medicine. And this is largely done by taking a personalized model of a patient, loading it into Ansys, putting your medical device in them, and actually running a simulation of how their body specifically might respond to your medical device. And that can be in the cardiovascular system where you load in their entire cardiovascular system, respiratory system, a specific joint that you're looking for a replacement for, whatever that be. And it can also be used to help with personalized drug delivery mechanisms and some tailored surgical procedures. Lastly, Ansys can help leverage and maximize your product reliability. And this can be done in multiple ways, whether it be through simulating adverse scenario effects on device reliability, looking into product performance consistency across numerous simulated environments, potentially looking at simulating interference between wearable devices for electromagnetic field interference. And then lastly, potentially optimizing devices through the Design Explorer module in Ansys. And that can be done in any physics field. Now that I've given you a little bit of an idea on how Ansys is used in the medical field and how it can be helped to push forward your business initiatives, we'll start to go through some of those case studies. And I'll start out with some fluids ones, specifically for the respiratory system. So CFD was utilized to do targeted drug delivery for tumors in the lungs. This was done by localizing drug distribution to the afflicted tissue by modeling the drug release patterns as it went through the trachea into the lungs, and then figuring out where you could actually inject the drug into the mouth in order to optimize, or into the throat in order to optimize its path to the afflicted tissue. And similarly, CFD was also used to model flow through inhalers, allowing not only optimization of the inhaler device, but also the powder that's used and how its drug delivery could be optimized. A few more cases, these ones relating to the cardiovascular system. These are a little bit more related to coupling the CFD solver to other solvers. So the first was coupling the computational fluid dynamics and the electromagnetic solvers in order to help progress and design and develop an artificial heart that is based on a constant pump, so it doesn't involve any valves in its operation. Another one was where CFD was coupled with a mechanical solver in order to design and optimize stents for transcatheter or aortic valve replacement surgeries by obtaining forces on the stent and artery wall that would have otherwise been impossible to obtain, which helped to give an idea as to the lifetime of the product, if the stent would stay in place in the artery just based on friction between the stent and the wall, and other things like that that were critical to the design but couldn't be obtained by traditional experimental methods. And the last one here is just that where CFD was used to simulate babies who were born with a single ventricle and how to best perform a surgery to fit their individual needs. And this was done by scanning in the infant's cardiovascular system and running simulations on how different surgical operations affected the blood flow throughout their body, and then optimizing what would be the best surgical option for their health. So those are some of the fluid case studies. I will hand it over to Will to cover some of the mechanical case studies.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I wanted to start by just kind of addressing some of the common applications for Ansys Mechanical, and it's really pulled in anytime basically material failure is a concern. Any sort of structural analysis falls under that mechanical umbrella. So it's used commonly for prosthetics and implants. All sorts of structural simulations that can be done there, because really it's a structural integrity question. Surgical handpieces is another common application. You can even do things like couple a piezoelectric response to the motion of some sort of surgical handpiece. So that's another thing we see relatively often. And then, kind of like Chris mentioned, some of the real power also comes in when you start to couple these analyses and deal with multi-physics. So in the fluid structural realm, stents are really common to use that FSI simulation, and that's actually something we're going to show you in just a minute here. And then electromagnetics and structure simulation are also coupled relatively frequently. One example is thermal stresses in radiation therapy devices. So in cases where you have high heat loads, we need to make sure that the material can take that heat and characterize how it's going to change throughout that process. So now to get into a case study here. Thank you, Chris. So this first one is this was a prosthetic device designed by HuMoTech Prosthetics. It was a robotic lower limb, and did really a whole battery of simulations on this, from piece parts to sub-assemblies all the way up to the full assembly. So that I think in those final analyses, the model got relatively large, but Ansys can handle that full assembly and characterizing all of that different behavior. And for them, you can see there's a lot of joints and some complex contacts, areas where things may separate or not separate. And Ansys Mechanical allows you to capture all that contact definition and really make sure that your simulated assembly is moving and behaving like the assembly would in real life. You can also do fatigue analysis in Ansys Mechanical, so really important for product life cycle and making sure that there's a high confidence that these components will survive throughout the product life. And so by doing the simulation, they were able to achieve a 25% weight reduction of the end effector, which is really an enormous weight reduction, and as you can imagine, really significant in the performance of this device. And then, kind of the less tangible things, increased simulation productivity. They had used some other softwares in the past that took a little longer to get a simulation out, and because of the efficiencies here, they could really run all the simulations they wanted a lot more quickly and not have to worry about the throughput of simulations. And then that fatigue analysis, kind of like I mentioned, also allowed just confidence that throughout the product life cycle, they weren't going to see unexpected failures or changes in product behavior, after a few years or cycles or whatever it may be. And my second case study here is this was a tooling application by Stryker Global Technology Center, and they were making orthopedic metal plates that needed to be bent in relatively specific and exact ways. And there was some complex material behavior to capture here, material plasticity, which can be captured in quite a few different ways depending on input data that you have. And they needed to model all that and then get out deformation, stress, and then the reaction forces of that tooling. And in this case, this was a company that actually had already kind of built some test fixtures and had performed some physical testing, and could then run this in mechanical. And they found that it was very accurately replicating that physical testing, which is always a really great confidence builder and a great data point that these simulations are set up properly. So with that confidence, they could then, reduce that physical testing, reduce those costs, and end up with a faster time to market, which is, of course, incredibly valuable. And then I think next we have a short video of, do you want to go ahead and play that, Chris? So this is just a little preview of what I'll be showing you here. We set up a relatively simple FSI demo of a stent inside an artery here. So this little video is showing the streamlines of the blood flow through the stent. And now let me switch over to my screen here. And so what we're seeing here is the workbench window, and workbench is kind of the base interface that allows us to couple all these different physics and analyses in Ansys. And it's really kind of a nice, graphical, visual way of connecting analyses and seeing where data is being passed, which makes it a lot more easy to set up. You're not worried about typing in file paths and that sort of thing. So all we did here was we have this transient structural analysis, and then down here, this CFX is all of our fluid analysis, and then we couple them together with this system coupling component that performs some other calculations for us. So the real issue here is, as many of you probably already know, when we have blood flow through this artery, it's creating pressure on the artery walls and on the stent, which will then deform the stent and artery walls. And when there's deformation in that flow path, will then change the flow and then change the pressure, which will change the deformation. So you end up in this iterative loop. And that's what these system coupling devices are really great for. We can have a two-way coupling where we're taking those fluid pressures, passing them back to mechanical, getting those deformations out, passing that deformed mesh back to the fluid simulation, and then iterating back and forth until we get a nice converged result. So as you can see here, we used a symmetry model, so that's why we're only seeing half of the entire model. And this is the Ansys Mechanical window we're seeing here, by the way. So we can see we have the stent here and the artery on the outside. We can get some nice stress plots. So this is, you can see the stent is carrying most of the stress, deformation plots as well. We can see the artery is doing most of the deformation. This is a transient study, so we can animate some of those results. If this will load here in just a minute. And we can watch the stress profile change as the flow changes. I should mention too, we've set up some pressure pulses. That's why it's a transient study here, to simulate, the pulsing of blood through an artery. So this little animation kind of shows how the stress changes and propagates in the material. And just to give you a quick idea as well, this is on the fluid side, the CFD side. So we have our fluid domain. We've defined some inlet and outlet pressures. We have a sinusoidal pressure pulse here defined as our input. And then when we go back to Workbench, I can show you the system coupling here. So the solutions from the structural study and this fluid study are then passed into the system coupling element. And we just kind of define where those interfaces are, where these fluid-solid interfaces are, and then we let the system coupler iterate, until it reaches a converged solution. So it's a really powerful and relatively simple way to, get very accurate simulations and generate tons of data and valuable results. Just by coupling all this together and getting a realistic model. And I think with that, I'll pass it off to Jared for the electromagnetic portion of this presentation.
Sure. Thank you, Will. Let me show my screen. Yeah, that's the one I want. So there are a lot of different cases that I could talk about regarding electromagnetics and biomedical research. We can talk about low frequency. We can talk, with things like MRI, DC, conduction, low frequency AC analysis. We can talk about high frequency when we can discuss antennas, antenna coupling, PCB modeling in regards to the human body. Where Ansys, the solutions that Ansys provides with the electromagnetic suite of tools, rather, you can ask and answer a lot of different questions regarding your electronic devices. And today I'm going to cover, a couple of low frequency test cases, but things such as MRI development, defibrillators, antenna coupling. So creating your antennas in free space and then incorporating them into a more complex model. With the human body, if you were talking about wearables, inside a human body, and we can look at things such as fields. We can look at things such as S parameter return loss information, and you can really guide your design and development with these tools. And finally, Chris touched a little bit on, FDA certification. There are also some testing suites within the electromagnetic toolkits, which include testing things such as radiated and conducted emissions. Now, this is, I think, a rather nice suite of tools because not only can you do the analysis and design process within HFSS or Maxwell, but then you can bring them into a experimental simulation chamber and get radiated emission data. This can then drive decisions if you need to change something, let's say on a PCB, decoupling capacitor change. This is where you're going to see the performance of your devices and you can get a good feeling for how they're going to perform. And of course, just like you would in a test environment where it's in a phantom, or you have an engineer holding your device in the chamber to get an idea of your parameters, you can do the exact same in these tools. So again, it's not just looking at your devices in free space. It's looking at and incorporating these models in together to get a good understanding of how your device should perform in an actual test. And where this really comes from is the accuracy driven by the Ansys tools. And so one of those is the human body model. So this is something where you can include this into your models, and you get experimental data captured results for permittivity, conductivity in regards to frequency, which is then going to help you get more accurate models than just, for example, a square block that is supposed to be a phantom. There are also levels of accuracy within the tools, so you can not have to run a 7-day simulation. You don't have to run a 3-day simulation. You can get results out in a matter of hours, but you can also trust the accuracy of the tools and the simulation model themselves. Now, of course, this human body model isn't just the full body. You can look at organ specifics. You can look at the head model. You can look at arm models, and break the tissues up as you see fit. Also, you can decrease the amount of granularity. So, maybe you're looking at skin depth, for example. This is where you can really speed up some of your simulations, again, driving that with accuracy. The case I'm going to talk about, the first one I'm going to talk about is some body resistance modeling, as well as looking at placement of these paddles and measuring voltage, current, and the magnetic field. So in this situation, this is again low frequency DC conduction and low frequency AC. And what's important with this model is that the human body is represented appropriately, so you're getting the results that you would expect to get on a person. So this is something where we can now optimize placement. We can see as the paddles move how things such as current and the magnetic field are going to change. And you can do that quickly with this design. So as you can see in the bottom picture, the paddles, placed on the right pectoral, and then the blue paddle placed just on the left rib cage. And that left paddle is going to be moving, and we can see the changes in results as it's moving. So the measurement of this magnetic field on the position of placement, that's something that we can't see. But within the simulation software, we can go and get this field information. We can plot this and take those results again and drive change in our design. But not only can we see magnetic field, but also the current across the device and across the body model. So we can see how current is flowing within the human body model, and we can measure that difference in current again as that paddle is moving, and get those results. And in this case, by moving that paddle, it caused a 2 amp change from position A to position B. And that in a case of a patient could be very impactful. And this is one where the correct placement of those paddles could result in in an adverse result, and that's it's very important when these are being used. Not only can we do things such as a static, in this case, simulation, where it's one step in time, but you can also do transient solves, where you can now answer different questions that the static solve wouldn't answer. And these are just a few that I thought of, but there are a lot others. But looking at things such as localized heating, now coupling the electric and magnetic field results into a CFD heat simulation. So either using Ansys Ice Pack or using fluids, we can now transition those electromagnetic results into changes in temperature. And another thing we're going to cover, I'll show a little bit later, is we can look at, from a mechanical perspective, torque, force. But, things like tissue heating for coupling, as well as, electrical characteristics, such as how are your pulse characteristics changing due to now this body loaded model. These are things that can now be solved with the Ansys tools, with the transient solver. From there, I'm going to jump now into a magnetic resonance simulation. So in this study, we're looking at the effect of torque, the effect of the magnetic fields on the torque of an implanted object. So what you see here is an object moving, and the resulting fields and torque on that object as it's rotating. So we may not know position of implants, so we can go in and change that position and then simulate and get the results of the fields, as well as now coupling in mechanical to look at torque. And this is, a really interesting simulation because, one, the position of the implant, in this case, in a rotational situation, it shows that it will impact, the fields are impacted differently depending on the position of that said implant. And this is important. We have to know these things because we don't know where potentially an implant is going to be on a patient coming in. But also we want to make sure that the implant is not affected to the point where it's going to damage it or damage the patient. So what we see also here is this movement, again, not just rotating, but movement also within the simulation in a linear sense. And again, we can look at fields, we can look at torque, and this is what we're showing here. And you can get into more detail, where in this case it's of course run at a in free space here, but including it within a body. So we can measure now, as we talked before a little bit about, is looking at the heat of the implant. So as there is this magnetic field in the body, it is the implant heating, which could then cause damage to the patient. These are things that we can simulate with the tools and get those results. And this is something now where we can bring into, let's say if there are some type of capacitors or or other circuitry here that you would want to tune. So in this case with the MRI, we can use the field solver, the 3D field solver for this level of simulation, then transition it into a circuit solve where you now can look at the impact of changing values in your different components. And by changing those values, you're going to see a change in your parameters as well as your fields. And what I think is really interesting about these tools is you can do this in real time. So I can change a capacitor value or a host of capacitor values, let's say from 4.5 nanofarad all the way, I can change those values to 5 nanofarads, 10 nanofarads, whatever, and you'll see that effect in your results. And this is, at least from for an electrical engineer, this is really nice because for a lot of tools, when I'm doing these simulations, if I make small changes to my design, it's traditionally going to cause me to resimulate, which is time lost. Another thing that we could talk about as well is there are ways that you can use adjunct primitives. This is the ability now where I can simulate once, make small changes to my model, and it will, just like with tuning capacitors in a 3D environment, I can change those values and I can get the results updated in real time. And so when we're talking about design considerations, this is where the Ansys tools, I think, are blow everyone else out of the water, because it's doing and changing these designs and giving you that accuracy that you can go back with confidence with your changes and prototype and build from there. And not only that, just as I said before, with the testing suites, you can take for high frequency devices, for transmitters, you can take these models now and incorporate them into that testing to get that level of analysis. So when you're doing your physical testing, you're going to be able to do so with confidence, because once you're getting into that chamber for radiated emissions, for susceptibility, for conductive emissions, those failed tests require changes, require time, require additional testing, which is more money. And this cycle without simulation repeats itself until you pass. And so getting the idea of how your device is going to function within the simulation environment first is, this is confidence building. And this allows you to make informed decisions on your redesigns. So some additional things we can talk about related to high frequency. So we can talk about things such as antenna coupling. We can talk about things, implanted antenna modeling. So body loaded models. So again, taking your antennas from that free space environment, putting them in the body, simulating, getting those results, and moving forward from there. This is where, again, it's just something that it couples your entire results. Now, we talk about multiphysics as well. We can look at those results. We can look at heating on tissues. We can look at SAR, both in the low frequency and in the high frequency. And we can use that with these suites of tools. And just a little bit more here, moving this through, measuring the torque and the flux density on this implanted device. It's not just a 2D plot. It's these 3D plots on objects. It's these field plots. So you get a good understanding of how your device, your implanted device, your MRI, is performing in a host of different situations. And we as designers can change these simulations to better answer these questions. And now, again, going back, coupling these physics, we can ask these different questions of, well, how will this magnet perform in a different heated environment? If this increases in temperature, if it's not just an ambient temperature, how is this going to perform? These are things that we can ask and have answered, using these tools. And again, I think that's something that's just really, it's really something unique here with these. And the coupling of physics, as Will showed, is very smooth. Within the electronics desktop itself, it's a little bit different than Workbench, but you can couple your CFD simulations such as IcePack. You can bring that in where it's a transition of your EM loss, quickly bringing it into IcePack, getting an IcePack simulation. You can actually couple it two ways, where it can go from IcePack to your EM solver, then back to IcePack, and you can do that as many iterations as you choose. These are all quick to input settings, and you can get that feedback quickly and readily. Again, making design decisions, looking at things such as SAR, making that choice, looking at your antennas and the impact that they have on your models. And again, it's one of those with the electromagnetic tools that there are so many different applications in the biomedical world that being able to couple these physics together just allow you to keep asking more and more questions and getting those high accuracy answers.